Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent weekends at the mall or gossiping about boys, she could be found at the local shooting range with her grandfather, learning to handle firearms with the precision of a surgeon. Her grandfather, a retired Marine sniper, had taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about patience, breathing, mathematics, and respect for the weapon. When Sarah turned 18, her grandfather surprised her with a custom-built rifle for her birthday. It wasn't like the standard black tactical rifles that filled the gun stores. This one was different. The stock was painted in soft pink and white camouflage patterns with delicate floral designs etched into the metal. Her grandfather had commissioned it specially, knowing that Sarah loved both the beauty and the beast within the weapon. A rifle should reflect its owner, he told her as she unwrapped it with tears in her eyes. You're strong, you're precise, but you're also uniquely you. Don't ever let anyone tell you that being feminine makes you weak. The rifle was a masterpiece of engineering. Built on a precision chassis with a match-grade barrel, it was capable of incredible accuracy at distances that would challenge even experienced marksmen. The scope was a high-end German optic that cost more than most people's cars. Every component had been carefully selected and tuned for maximum performance. When Sarah decided to enlist in the military after high school, she knew she wanted to become a sniper. Her test scores were exceptional, her physical fitness was outstanding, and her marksmanship skills were already beyond many seasoned soldiers. However, she quickly discovered that the military world was still very much a man's domain. During her initial training, the other recruits would snicker when they saw her cleaning her personal rifle. "Look at Barbie's gun," they would whisper. "Did she get that at a toy store?" The comments stung, but Sarah had learned from her grandfather to let her performance speak louder than words. She kept the rifle immaculately maintained and spent every free moment practicing with it at the range. Her drill sergeants were initially skeptical too. They had seen plenty of recruits who thought they knew how to shoot, because they had gone hunting with their fathers or had shot at tin cans in the backyard. But when Sarah stepped up to the firing line for her first qualification test, something changed in the atmosphere. Her breathing became controlled, her stance perfect, and her focus laser-sharp. Shot after shot found its mark with mechanical precision. While other recruits struggled to hit targets at 300 meters, Sarah was consistently placing rounds in tight groups at 600 meters and beyond. The range went quiet as even the instructors stopped what they were doing to watch this young woman, with the decorated rifle, outshoot soldiers who had been training for months. One particular instructor, Sergeant Rodriguez, had been the most vocal about his doubts regarding female snipers. He approached Sarah after the qualification round with a mixture of surprise and respect in his eyes. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked. Sarah simply replied, "My grandfather taught me that a pretty rifle can still be deadly, Sergeant. It's not about how it looks, it's about who's behind the scope." Word began to spread through the training facility about the girl with the pink rifle who could outshoot anyone on the base. Some soldiers began to take notice, not with mockery, but with genuine curiosity and respect. They wanted to know her story, her training methods, and how she had developed such incredible skill at such a young age. Sarah's confidence grew with each successful training exercise. She excelled in camouflage and concealment, learned to read wind patterns like a meteorologist, and studied ballistics with the dedication of a physics student. Her instructors began to see her not as an oddity, but as a potentially exceptional sniper who could serve her country with distinction. However, not everyone was ready to accept that a woman with a decorated rifle could be taken seriously in combat situations. The real tests were still ahead, and Sarah knew that she would have to prove herself again and again. But she was ready for the challenge, carrying with her the lessons from her grandfather and the quiet confidence that came from knowing her true capabilities. As her advanced sniper training began, Sarah faced new challenges and skeptics who would push her to her absolute limits. The pretty rifle that had once been a source of ridicule was about to become legendary, but the journey to that moment would test everything she had learned about herself, her abilities, and her determination to succeed in a world that wasn't quite ready for someone like her. Advanced Sniper School was a different world entirely. The men who arrived at the specialized training facility were already seasoned soldiers, many with combat experience and years of weapons training behind them. Sarah was one of only 3 women in a class of 47 students, and she quickly realized that her basic training achievements meant little here. The first week was designed to break students mentally before they even touched a rifle. Sleep deprivation, physical challenges, and psychological pressure were constant companions. Sarah watched as several tough-looking soldiers dropped out, unable to handle the stress. But she had learned mental toughness from her grandfather, who had survived 3 tours in Vietnam. "The mind is your most important weapon," he had always told her. "Everything else is just tools." When weapons training finally began, Sarah's pink and white rifle drew immediate attention from her new classmates. Unlike the basic training facility, these were elite soldiers who prided themselves on their tactical gear and professional appearance. To them, Sarah's decorated weapon looked like something from a child's toy box, completely inappropriate for serious military training. Staff Sergeant Williams, the head instructor, was a legend in sniper circles. He had confirmed kills in 3 different conflicts and was known for his no-nonsense approach to training. When he saw Sarah's rifle, his expression showed clear disapproval. "This isn't a fashion show, Martinez," he said coldly. "This is about life and death in combat situations. Your weapon needs to blend in, not stand out like a neon sign." Sarah respectfully disagreed, explaining that her rifle's appearance was irrelevant to its performance capabilities. Staff Sergeant Williams decided to make an example of her. He ordered her to attempt a shot that he knew would be nearly impossible for most students. A target at 200 meters in changing wind conditions with no spotting assistance. The other students gathered around,
many of them expecting to see the girl with the pretty rifle fail spectacularly.
Some were already whispering bets about how badly she would miss. Sarah approached the firing position with calm confidence, despite the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. She spent several minutes studying the wind flags, observing the grass movement, and calculating the numerous variables that would affect her bullet's flight path. When she finally settled behind her rifle, the range fell silent. Through her scope, the target looked impossibly small and distant. Sarah controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and gently pressed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the range, followed by tense seconds of waiting as the bullet traveled its long arc toward the target. The confirmation came through the radio. Direct hit, center mass. The silence that followed was different from before. It was the silence of respect and disbelief. Staff Sergeant Williams looked through his spotting scope and confirmed the hit himself, before turning to Sarah with a completely different expression on his face. From that moment, the dynamic in the class began to shift. The other students stopped making jokes about Sarah's rifle and started asking genuine questions about her training and techniques. They began to understand that the weapon's appearance had no bearing on its effectiveness or the skill of the person using it. Sarah's roommate, Jennifer, was one of the other 2 women in the program. She had been struggling with the precision shooting requirements and was close to being dropped from the course. Sarah offered to help her, sharing techniques she had learned from her grandfather and from her own experience. Together, they practiced breathing exercises, studied wind reading, and worked on building the mental focus necessary for long-range shooting. The training became increasingly difficult as the weeks progressed. Students were required to make shots in various weather conditions, from uncomfortable positions and under time pressure. They learned to move unseen across hostile terrain, to build camouflaged positions, and to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot opportunity. Sarah excelled in every aspect of the training. Her rifle, despite its unconventional appearance, proved to be incredibly reliable and accurate. She consistently scored in the top 3 on every shooting exercise, often outperforming students who had years more experience than she did. Her success began to earn her grudging respect from even the most skeptical classmates. One particular exercise involved a simulated combat scenario, where students had to infiltrate enemy territory, establish a sniper position, and engage multiple targets at varying distances. Sarah's team was assigned one of the most challenging routes, through dense terrain with limited visibility and multiple obstacles. Working with her spotter, an experienced soldier named Martinez, no relation, Sarah demonstrated not only her shooting skills but also her tactical thinking and leadership abilities. She identified weaknesses in the enemy's defensive positions, planned approach routes that maximized concealment, and executed shots that eliminated key targets with surgical precision. The exercise was deemed so successful that it was used as a teaching example for future classes. Staff Sergeant Williams, who had initially questioned whether Sarah belonged in the program, began using her techniques as examples for other students to follow. The pretty rifle that had once been a source of mockery was now being studied by military instructors who wanted to understand what made it so effective. As graduation from sniper school approached, Sarah had established herself as one of the top performers in her class, but she knew that real combat would present challenges that no training could fully prepare her for, and she would soon have the opportunity to prove that her skills were as real as the dangers she would face. Sarah's first deployment came 8 months after graduating sniper school. She was assigned to a forward operating base in a mountainous region, where enemy insurgents had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against coalition forces for months. The base was surrounded by rugged terrain that provided perfect hiding spots for enemy fighters, making it extremely dangerous for regular patrols. When Sarah arrived with her distinctive rifle, the reaction from the seasoned combat veterans was mixed. Some had heard stories about her exceptional training performance, while others remained skeptical about having a woman in a sniper role. Captain Thompson, the base commander, was initially concerned about how the local insurgents might react to facing a female soldier, but he had read Sarah's service record and decided to give her a chance to prove herself. Her first week at the base was spent learning the local terrain and studying intelligence reports about enemy movement patterns. Sarah worked closely with Master Sergeant Rodriguez, an experienced spotter who had been assigned to work with her. Rodriguez had initial reservations about partnering with someone so young and inexperienced in actual combat, but he was professional enough to keep his doubts to himself and focus on the mission. The base had been dealing with a particularly troublesome sniper who had been taking shots at soldiers during routine patrols. This enemy marksman had already wounded 3 coalition soldiers and had managed to evade capture despite numerous attempts to locate him. The soldiers had nicknamed him Ghost because of his ability to appear, take a shot, and disappear without a trace. Intelligence suggested that Ghost was operating from a network of caves in the mountains overlooking the base. The terrain was treacherous with steep cliffs, loose rocks, and limited cover for approaching forces. Previous attempts to locate and eliminate the threat had failed because the enemy had intimate knowledge of the area and could disappear into the cave system whenever pursuit got too close. Sarah volunteered to take on the mission of hunting down Ghost. She spent days studying topographical maps, analyzing the patterns of previous attacks, and calculating possible shooting positions based on the angles and distances involved. Her methodical approach impressed Rodriguez, who began to see that her training had prepared her well for this type of challenge. The plan they developed involved a 3-day infiltration mission deep into enemy territory. Sarah and Rodriguez would move under cover of darkness, establish a concealed observation post, and wait for Ghost to reveal himself. It was a dangerous mission that required perfect execution and a great deal of patience. On the night of the mission, Sarah carefully prepared her rifle, checking every component and loading it with match-grade ammunition that she had specially selected for the expected shooting distances. The pink and white camouflage that had once been mocked actually worked well in the rocky, sandy terrain where they would be operating. The insertion went smoothly, with Sarah and Rodriguez moving silently through the darkness using night vision equipment to navigate the treacherous terrain. They reached their planned position just before dawn and quickly established a camouflaged observation post that gave them a clear view of the suspected enemy operating area. For 2 full days, they waited and watched. Sarah remained motionless for hours at a time, scanning the distant ridgelines through her scope and looking for any sign of enemy movement. The physical discomfort of maintaining sniper positions for extended periods was something she had trained for, but the mental stress of knowing that Ghost could appear at any moment kept her constantly alert. On the 3rd morning, their patience was rewarded. Rodriguez spotted movement in a cave opening approximately 1,800 meters away. Through his spotting scope, he could see a figure setting up what appeared to be a rifle position. Sarah adjusted her scope and confirmed the target, calculating wind speed and direction, altitude differences, and the various ballistic factors that would affect her shot. The shot would be challenging but well within her capabilities. Sarah controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and placed the crosshairs precisely where her calculations indicated. The morning air was still, which would help with accuracy, but the extreme distance meant that even a small error could result in a complete miss. She squeezed the trigger with the gentle pressure that had become second nature through countless hours of practice. The rifle's report echoed across the mountain valley, and Sarah maintained her sight picture to observe the bullet's impact. Through her scope, she saw the target suddenly jerk and disappear back into the cave. Rodriguez confirmed the hit through his spotting scope and immediately began calling in their position to headquarters. They had successfully engaged the enemy sniper, but now they needed to extract quickly before other insurgents in the area could respond to the shot. The extraction was as carefully planned as the insertion had been. Sarah and Rodriguez moved quickly but quietly back toward friendly territory, using predetermined routes and rally points in case they became separated. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of enemy fighters moving through the area, searching for whoever had taken the shot. When they finally reached the safety of the base perimeter, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. She had successfully completed her first combat mission and eliminated a threat that had been terrorizing coalition forces for weeks. The pretty rifle that had been such a source of controversy had performed flawlessly under the most demanding conditions possible. Word of the successful mission spread quickly through the base. Soldiers who had previously questioned Sarah's abilities began to look at her with new respect. Captain Thompson personally congratulated her on the mission's success and noted in his report that her performance had exceeded all expectations. But Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. Combat deployments lasted for months, and there would be many more challenges ahead. The enemy had learned that there was a new threat they had to contend with, and they would undoubtedly adapt their tactics accordingly. The real test of her abilities was still to come. 3 months into her deployment, Sarah had established herself as one of the most effective snipers in the region. She had successfully completed 12 missions, including several that had eliminated high-value targets who had been causing significant problems for coalition forces. Her reputation had spread beyond her own base, and other units were beginning to request her assistance for their most challenging operations. The success, however, came with its own complications. Enemy forces had become aware that there was an exceptionally skilled sniper operating in the area, and they had begun taking countermeasures. They moved more carefully, used better concealment, and had even brought in their own trained snipers to try to hunt down the coalition marksmen who had been causing them so much trouble. Intelligence reports indicated that a particularly dangerous enemy sniper team had been deployed to the region specifically to eliminate Sarah. This team was led by a former military sniper who had deserted from an allied force several years earlier, taking his training and expertise to the insurgent side. He was known to be highly skilled and completely ruthless. With several confirmed kills of coalition snipers to his credit, Colonel Davidson, the regional commander, called Sarah into his office for a briefing about this new threat. He explained that the enemy team was believed to be equipped with advanced weapons and optics, possibly even better than what coalition forces were using. The deserter knew coalition tactics and procedures, which made him extremely dangerous to face in sniper versus sniper combat. "I want you to understand the risks," Colonel Davidson told Sarah. "This isn't like hunting insurgents who are poorly trained and equipped. You'll be facing someone who has had the same training you've had, possibly more. If you're not comfortable taking on this mission, no one will think less of you." Sarah appreciated the colonel's honesty, but she had no intention of backing down from the challenge. She had trained for exactly this type of situation, and she knew that her skills and equipment were more than capable of handling whatever the enemy could throw at her. Besides, as long as this enemy sniper team was operating in the area, every coalition soldier on every patrol was at risk. The intelligence about the enemy team's location was limited, but reconnaissance suggested they were operating from a network of buildings in a village about 20 kilometers from the base. The area was known to be hostile, with limited routes for approach and extraction. Any mission to eliminate the threat would be extremely dangerous and would require perfect planning and execution. Sarah worked with her team to develop a comprehensive plan for hunting down the enemy snipers. They studied satellite imagery, analyzed past attack patterns, and identified several possible positions where the enemy team might set up their operations. The mission would require them to move deep into enemy territory and remain there for potentially several days while they waited for an opportunity to engage. The night before the mission, Sarah spent extra time preparing her rifle. She cleaned every component meticulously, checked her scope's zero, and selected her ammunition with extreme care. The pink and white camouflage had faded somewhat during her months of deployment, but the rifle remained as accurate as the day her grandfather had given it to her. Rodriguez, who had become her regular spotter and had developed tremendous respect for her abilities, helped with the final preparations. They had worked together on so many missions that they could almost communicate without words, understanding each other's movements and intentions through subtle signals and shared experience. The insertion was more complex than their previous missions, requiring them to move through several checkpoints and coordinate with multiple units to ensure safe passage through friendly territory before entering the hostile area. They traveled light, carrying only essential equipment and enough supplies for a 4-day mission. Once they reached the operational area, Sarah and Rodriguez moved with extreme caution. They knew that the enemy snipers were actively hunting for coalition forces, and any mistake could result in them becoming targets instead of hunters. They used every piece of cover available, moved only during darkness, and established temporary positions that could be abandoned quickly if necessary. On the second day, they located what appeared to be the enemy team's primary operating base. It was a fortified compound with multiple buildings and excellent fields of fire in all directions. Through careful observation, they identified several positions where enemy snipers could operate, but they couldn't see the actual personnel because of the sophisticated camouflage and concealment that the enemy was using. Sarah realized that patience would be the key to success. The enemy team was professional and disciplined, but eventually they would have to reveal themselves to engage coalition targets. When that moment came, she needed to be ready to take advantage of it. The opportunity came on the third morning. Sarah was scanning the compound through her scope when she caught a brief glimpse of movement in one of the upper-story windows. It was just a flash of reflected light off an optical device, but it was enough to give away the enemy sniper's position. The range was approximately 2,400 meters, well beyond what most snipers would consider a reasonable shot, but Sarah had trained extensively at these distances, and her rifle was capable of accurate fire far beyond normal engagement ranges. She began calculating the numerous variables that would affect her shot: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, altitude differences, and the ballistic characteristics of her chosen ammunition. Rodriguez provided constant updates on wind conditions and helped with range estimation and target identification. They worked together as a seamless team, with each person focused on their specific responsibilities in preparing for the shot. Sarah settled into her firing position and began the mental process that preceded every shot. She controlled her breathing, relaxed her muscles, and focused entirely on the target through her scope. The enemy sniper was barely visible, just a shadow in the distant window, but Sarah could see enough to place her shot accurately. The moment came when everything aligned perfectly. Her breathing, her sight picture, the wind conditions, and her mental state. Sarah pressed the trigger with the smooth, controlled motion that had been drilled into her through thousands of practice rounds. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and she maintained her sight picture to observe the bullet's impact. The bullet's flight time at 2,400 meters seemed to last forever. Sarah held her position behind the scope, watching through the magnified optic as her shot traveled the incredible distance to the target. She had made all the calculations correctly, compensated for every variable she could identify, and trusted in the precision of her rifle and ammunition. The impact was confirmed by Rodriguez through his spotting scope. The enemy sniper had been eliminated with a single, perfectly placed shot. But their mission wasn't complete yet. Intelligence had suggested there were at least 2 enemy snipers in the team, and they needed to locate and eliminate the second threat before it could retaliate. Almost immediately after Sarah's shot, the compound erupted into activity. Enemy fighters began moving between buildings, searching for the source of the shot that had killed their sniper. Sarah and Rodriguez remained perfectly still in their concealed position, knowing that any movement could give away their location to the remaining enemy marksmen. For nearly an hour, they waited and watched as enemy forces conducted an increasingly frantic search of the surrounding area. Sarah kept her rifle trained on the compound, scanning for any sign of the second sniper, while Rodriguez monitored radio communications and watched for flanking movements that might threaten their position. The second enemy sniper finally revealed himself when he took a position in a different building, apparently trying to locate Sarah's hiding spot. Rodriguez spotted the muzzle flash first and quickly directed Sarah's attention to the new target location. This sniper was even more carefully concealed than the first one, with only the smallest portion of his position visible through Sarah's scope. The range was approximately 2,600 meters, pushing the limits of what even the most advanced sniper systems could achieve reliably. At this distance, bullet drop would be measured in meters rather than inches, and even the slightest miscalculation could result in a complete miss. Sarah knew that she would likely only get one opportunity to make the shot before the enemy sniper detected her position and returned fire. She spent several minutes recalculating all of her ballistic data for the new range and environmental conditions. The wind had shifted slightly since her first shot, and the angle to the target was different, requiring adjustments to her scope settings. Rodriguez provided continuous updates on wind conditions and helped confirm the range estimation using his laser rangefinder. Sarah made the necessary adjustments to her scope and settled into her firing position once again. Through her optic, the target was barely visible, just a small portion of the enemy sniper's head and shoulder exposed behind his concealment. The shot would require absolute precision, with no margin for error. As she prepared to take the shot, Sarah thought briefly about how far she had come from that first day when her fellow soldiers had mocked her pink and white rifle. She had proven that appearance meant nothing compared to skill, training, and dedication. The rifle that had been dismissed as a toy was about to make a shot that would be talked about for years to come. The shot felt perfect as soon as she pressed the trigger. Her breathing was controlled, her grip was consistent, and her sight alignment was exact. The rifle recoiled smoothly, and Sarah maintained her sight picture to observe the bullet's impact at the distant target. Rodriguez's confirmation came through his spotting scope. Another direct hit. The second enemy sniper had been eliminated, and the threat to coalition forces in the region had been neutralized. But Sarah barely had time to process their success before Rodriguez urgently signaled that they needed to move. Immediately, enemy forces had triangulated the general direction of Sarah's shots and were rapidly moving to surround their position. Multiple vehicles were approaching from different directions, and Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of helicopters in the distance. The enemy was committing significant resources to capturing or eliminating the sniper who had just taken out their entire specialized team. The extraction became a running battle as Sarah and Rodriguez moved quickly through the hostile terrain, while enemy forces closed in from multiple directions. They had planned several alternate routes for exactly this situation, and they used their knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of their pursuers while moving toward the extraction point. Sarah carried her rifle with the same care she would show a wounded comrade. Despite the urgent need for speed, she made sure the weapon was protected from damage as they moved through rocky terrain and dense vegetation. The rifle had performed flawlessly under the most demanding conditions, and she wasn't going to let it be damaged during the extraction. The helicopter pickup was conducted under fire, with enemy forces close enough to engage the aircraft as it landed to collect Sarah and Rodriguez. The pilot had to approach fast and leave even faster, barely giving them time to board before lifting off and heading back toward friendly territory. As they flew back to base, Sarah reflected on what they had accomplished. The two shots she had just made were at distances that most snipers never attempted, even under ideal conditions. They had been made under combat stress with limited time for preparation, and in hostile territory where detection meant almost certain death. When they landed at the base, word of their mission had already spread through the communications network. Colonel Davidson was waiting for them personally, along with several other senior officers who wanted to debrief them about the engagement. The shots would need to be confirmed and documented, as they represented some of the longest-range combat eliminations ever recorded. The distance measurements were verified using GPS coordinates and satellite imagery. Sarah's first shot had been at exactly 2,287 meters, while the second shot was measured at 2,643 meters. Both shots had been direct hits on targets that were barely visible even through high-powered optics. News of the extraordinary shots began to spread beyond the immediate military community. Weapons manufacturers wanted to study Sarah's rifle and ammunition to understand what had made such precision possible at extreme range. Training schools wanted to analyze her techniques to incorporate them into their curriculum. But for Sarah, the recognition was less important than the knowledge that she had protected her fellow soldiers and proven that skill and Determination mattered more than appearances or preconceived notions about what a warrior should look like. The confirmation of Sarah's 2,743-meter shot created a sensation throughout the military community. It wasn't just the distance that made it remarkable, it was the precision, the conditions under which it was made, and the tactical significance of eliminating such a dangerous enemy threat. Military historians began researching records to determine if it was one of the longest confirmed combat kills in modern warfare. Within days, Sarah found herself being interviewed by investigators from multiple agencies who needed to verify every detail of the engagement. They examined her rifle, tested her ammunition, and recreated the environmental conditions to understand how such an incredible shot had been possible. The pink and white rifle that had once been a source of embarrassment was now being studied as a masterpiece of precision engineering. The story began to spread beyond the military. Journalists embedded with coalition forces heard about the female sniper with the decorated rifle, who had made impossible shots in combat. Despite military censorship and operational security concerns, details of Sarah's achievements began to appear in news reports back home. Her hometown newspaper in Texas ran a front-page story about their local hero who had become one of the most effective snipers in the military. The high school shooting coach who had once questioned whether girls belonged on the rifle team publicly apologized and asked if Sarah would visit to speak to current students. When she returned home, Sarah's grandfather received a phone call from a reporter asking about his granddaughter, his training, and the custom rifle he had built for her. With tears of pride in his eyes, he told them, "I always knew she was special, but even I never imagined she would achieve something like this. That rifle was built with love, but it was Sarah's heart and determination that made it legendary." The rifle's unusual appearance, which had been such a source of controversy, suddenly became a symbol of breaking stereotypes and exceeding expectations. Military recruiting offices began using Sarah's story to encourage young women to consider careers in combat roles, showing that effectiveness came from skill and dedication rather than conforming to traditional expectations. Other female soldiers deployed in combat zones began to express themselves more individually while maintaining military standards. Some added small personal touches to their equipment, inspired by Sarah's example of remaining true to herself while excelling in her duties. The rigid conformity that had once defined military culture began to evolve slowly toward accepting that diversity could strengthen rather than weaken military effectiveness. Sarah completed her deployment with a record of accomplishments that surpassed most snipers with decades more experience. She had confirmed eliminations at distances that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, and she had done it all while maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and tactical excellence. When she finally returned home, Sarah was surprised by the reception waiting for her. The airport was filled with family, friends, and community members who had come to welcome home their local hero. Her grandfather stood at the front of the crowd, wearing his old Marine dress uniform and holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, sharpshooter." The reunion with her grandfather was emotional for both of them. He had lived to see his protégé exceed even his highest expectations, proving that the lessons he had taught her about skill, patience, and respect for weapons had been the foundation for her incredible achievements. The rifle he had lovingly customized for an 18-year-old girl had become part of military history. Sarah was invited to speak at military academies, training facilities, and civilian shooting organizations. She used these opportunities to share the lessons she had learned about the importance of proper training, mental preparation, and never allowing others' expectations to limit personal potential. She always brought her rifle with her, showing audiences that it was still the same weapon that had been mocked by her first drill sergeants. The way military offered Sarah opportunities for advancement and specialized assignments that would have been considered impossible for someone with her limited experience. She had proven herself under the most demanding conditions possible, and senior commanders wanted to utilize her skills and expertise for future operations. But Sarah also had to deal with the psychological impact of her combat experiences. The precision shots that had made her famous had eliminated human beings, even if they were enemy combatants who threatened coalition forces. She sought counseling to help process the emotional complexity of taking lives, even in the legitimate context of military combat. Her story inspired changes in military training programs. Instructors began emphasizing that combat effectiveness came from skill development and mental preparation rather than intimidating appearance or conformity to traditional expectations. The emphasis shifted toward identifying and developing individual strengths rather than forcing everyone into the same mold. Years later, Sarah's rifle would be displayed in a military museum, accompanied by a plaque describing her achievements and the breaking of barriers she represented. But more importantly, her example had opened doors for countless other individuals who might have been overlooked or dismissed because they didn't fit conventional expectations of what a warrior should look. Like the pretty rifle had indeed proven to be deadly, but its greatest victory wasn't measured in confirmed kills or record-breaking distances. It was measured in changed perceptions, broken stereotypes, and the inspiration it provided to others who dared to pursue excellence while remaining true to themselves. Sarah had shown the world that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most unexpected packages contain the greatest surprises. Her grandfather's words had proven prophetic. A rifle should reflect its owner. Sarah's rifle had reflected her perfectly. Beautiful, precise, uncompromising in its standards, and absolutely deadly when the situation demanded it. The mockery had long since faded into history, replaced by respect, admiration, and the knowledge that true excellence transcends appearance and exceeds all expectations.